Welcome everybody, really pleased that you can join us today. So welcome to our very first Oxford chapter meet. We're really excited that you can join us today for this webinar. You're all very welcome and we're looking forward to hosting our first Oxford Alumni Chapter webinar today. Just a quick housekeeping for today. As it's a webinar, all of your cameras will be turned off throughout the duration, just so that you're aware. We will be using the chat function today for any questions or technical challenges that you're having. So please use that. And Dylan from the Oxford Brooks team and Plassy from the Oxford Alumni Chapter team will be on hand to help you out. Towards the end of the webinar today, we're going to be asking you for some input into what future events could look like. As a chapter, we're very much in the planning phase for 2021, but we would really value your input and feedback. What do you want to hear about in 2021? What type of events do you like to see, such as business networking? Do you know a speaker? So please bear that in mind and be ready to share your thoughts in the chat at the end of the webinar. I'm so pleased we have two incredible speakers today. We're so grateful that they're here with us. First, we're going to hear from Tania Diggory, who is an entrepreneur, author, and mental health and wellbeing speaker. Tania is the founder and director of Karma, and she's going to be sharing tips on how to reduce stress, prevent burnout, and nurture good mental health. Then we have Susie Howells from Oxford Brookes University. Susie works as a staff developer and she's going to be taking us through wellbeing at work, snapshot at Brookes, covering what Oxford Brookes has been doing to support staff. But before we start, we're just going to introduce ourselves so you know who we are, what we do, and so you can get to know us. So Dylan, I'm not sure if you want to share some of the slides.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Dylan. So if we just go to the next slide. Brilliant, thank you. So, so my name is Dan O'Driscoll and I'm from the Oxford, I am the Oxford Alumni Chapter Head. I graduated in 2006 studying economics and business. I run my own business in Oxfordshire where I'm an executive coach and consultant. And I'm now going to introduce you to one of my colleagues, Plassy.
Hello, my name is Plassy and I work as Head of Business Development for a new technology park in Oxford. And my role with Dan, Molly and Dylan and Joe is that I'm a Brookes alumni. I did business, languages for business 20 years ago. I graduated and I'm just very keen to make sure that local businesses get engaged, supporting, networking, and also reach out to Brookes and Brookes reach out to them.
And I'm Joe Parton. I graduated in 2014 with a history degree and I've stayed in Oxford, so I'm a very proud member of a local Oxford Brookes alumni community and I'm the comms officer, so I'm looking forward to growing the chapter. And I currently work for a company called Consultant Connect who provide communication software to the NHS at this very important time.
Okay, I'm Molly Ashley. Thanks, Joe. I'm the Alumni Engagement Manager at Brookes. I sit within a Marketing and Communications Directorate and in a team with Dylan. We support over 50,000 alumni in the world, contactable alumni, in 189 different countries. And we support alumni with volunteering opportunities, careers events, mentoring, volunteering, as I said, webinars, participating back with Brookes in different ways, maybe giving talks, giving guest speakers, participating in scholarships. So it's quite a busy role. And these two chapters, the Oxford and the London, were set up in 2019. You'll hear a bit more about them and they're going from strength to strength. So I'm very excited. Thank you.
And hi, my name is Dylan, and I work for the alumni team, and I'm also a Brooks alumnus, having studied international law and international relations, finishing in 2013. And I'm a local resident, so I think I fit into all the categories that you could possibly think of in being an Oxford chapter member. I'm proud to be an OBU Oxford chapter member, so welcome and thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And as Molly alluded to, at the end of 2019, we set up as a chapter. We had different plans for what we wanted to do this year. With everything that's gone on, this is the first opportunity that we've really been able to put an event on as a chapter. So we are really thrilled. It's our first time doing this today, so hopefully we will navigate our way through. But I'm really thrilled that we're going to hear from our first speaker, Tania. Tania, thank you so much for joining us today. We're delighted that you're able to speak. Mental health and well-being is such an important topic, especially with the year that we've had. So I think we're going to be really interested to hear from you today. Just a quick reminder from all of our participants, if you have any questions, then please use the chat function. Plessy and Molly then will be putting those to Tania at the end of her talk. But I'm delighted that you're here, Tania. I'm going to stop talking. We're all going to turn our cameras off so the focus is on you, and I'm going to hand the floor over to you. So thank you so much, Tania.
Pleasure. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Dan. Really appreciate it. And hello, everyone. It's such a joy to be here. Really excited to share and hopefully support and help you all with some tips for supporting your mental health and well-being towards the end of this year and moving forward from 2021. So my name is Tania Diggory. I'm the founder and director of Karma. We're a training organisation that empowers entrepreneurs, freelancers and business teams to nurture good mental health and well-being. So we do this through workplace training courses for businesses of all shapes and sizes, webinars, events and digital products too. So a big key message about what we do is preventing burnout. And so I'm going to take you through a few steps today and tips for understanding the difference between stress and burnout and when it could become an issue, and most importantly, how to nurture and take care of your mental health and well-being. So there is a real distinction between that, and a lot of the work that we do is underpinned by this message of preventing burnout. Currently, stress levels and burnout has become an occupational phenomenon, and the leading cause of physical illness is linked to stress nowadays, which is really interesting when you think about it, when stress is a mental health concern linked to your mental health. And it has a real physical impact on our body, whether it's leading to chronic stress levels, chronic fatigue, etc. So it's really important to recognize that the mind and body are incredibly interconnected, and I'll talk a little bit more about that with you as well today. But the most important thing is also we can learn how to manage our stress levels and prevent burnout from being a feature and an issue in our lives. So I come at this from quite a personal perspective as well. I've been running Karma for 4 years now. We've grown a team in that time and really proud of all that we've achieved. But before this all took place, I've been running a business since 2010, and I was running 2 different companies around 2013-14. And this is when I wasn't really looking after myself as well as I could have done. I ended up working way too many hours, ended up burning out, and went through a period of depression and then panic attacks on and off for about a year or so. And at the time, I didn't really realize that was what I was going through. I didn't sort of necessarily label it as I'm depressed or I am having a panic attack, because I wasn't really aware of what that meant or what those signs and symptoms are, what they look like. So it was quite a big wake-up call to recognize that actually it's so important to look after yourself, especially in the business world when there's so much pressure and expectations, etc. And when you're actually able to perform at your best, then you can be at your best not only for yourself but for other people around you. So through my recovery, that really inspired me on this journey of understanding what the difference really was between stress and when burnout can be a feature, because it can suddenly creep up on you out of nowhere without even realizing it. So I understood more about that. I educated myself around mental health, what it really means, and looked into mindfulness, well-being, and all of these really important practices. And you know, it inspired me to set Karma up. I felt like there was a need for this platform in the business world, for there to be, you know, this an organization that says it's okay if you're struggling, and if you are, here's what you can do to support yourself. And I came across so many people who are also struggling and just not talking about it enough. So that's what was sort of inspired me to get on this journey. So the first year with Karma, it was really about, you know, research and understanding what people needed and what kind of services to offer. And here we are today doing what we do. So that's a bit of a background about us, me, how we got to this point. So if we just start with talking about stress burnout, as Dan mentioned, it's been an unusual and quite challenging and in some cases traumatic year for many people. So, you know, we're all on this journey together, but equally we all have our own individual experiences within that journey. And whether it's this past year, whether it's other things that you might be finding challenging, you know, in your own experience with having left university, whether you're just fresh from leaving it, or whether you've been, you know, in the working world for a while, just take a bit of time to think as I take you through this process today. You know, what does it mean to you? Like, what do you find are potential triggers in your life that bring up heightened stress levels? You know, what tends to create that for you? And just have that in your mind's eye as we go through this as a little process. So stress in and of itself isn't a bad thing. I do just want to say that, you know, in its nature, in its fundamental nature, its primary function and purpose in the brain, the stress response in the brain, is to keep you safe and away from danger. There are certain situations that will crop up in life where it's perfectly appropriate for the stress response to fire off. It sends an important signal in your body to pay attention to something. The difference is our stress response in our brain, it's evolved over many years, and it's a very primitive part of the brain. It's very primitive in nature, but it's the same functionality. So even though we've evolved as human beings, in terms of how the brain operates, the stress response is still the same. So it can't really differentiate between the difference of when, say, you've got an annoying email that's cropped up and that's created a stress level in you, or you're being chased by a saber-toothed tiger from a primitive perspective, right? The stress response in the brain registers them both as equally dangerous, threatening, stressful. You've got to get away from it, you've got to do something about it, whatever it is. So you have to almost develop this conversation with yourself and with that stress response when it fires off, because stress levels are different in modern day living than they have been in the past, you know, and the stress response is also important because it's enabled us to survive as a human species. When we're genuinely in a dangerous situation and we need to run away, we need to get away, that stress response will fire off. So if we didn't have that, we likely wouldn't have survived today. So in a way, we can be quite grateful for that. We just need to recognize that if we feel like we're firefighting a lot of different things in our modern day living, whether it's email notifications, WhatsApp and social media app notifications, whether it's demands of clients, whether it's expectations of others, whether it's instant messaging, we're in a 24/7 digitally switched on world, you know, so recognizing that is important. And it's so important to put boundaries in place for yourself. So if you feel like you're firefighting a lot of different things, recognizing that actually that stress level will register whatever it is that you're going through as threatening, dangerous, you need to keep safe from it. So you almost need to develop this dialogue with yourself, with that stress response, to remind yourself that, you know what, it's okay, I've got this. This isn't me in genuine threatening danger. You know, I'm not being chased by, you know, a large animal that's going to get me or whatever it is, or I'm not just about to be run over by a car, you know, whatever it is that would genuinely need you to move away, take action, etc. But obviously, a stress response fires off in different ways for different people, and it's important to pay attention to it, but we don't need to necessarily have that spike of stress and have it ongoing for long periods of time, because we're not designed as human beings to be stressed out human beings all the time. Okay, so it's just a case of understanding how to manage it, how to recognize that yes, it might crop up, yes, it might be a dangerous situation, but is it actually dangerous? And you can start to, you know, reflect on the danger of the situation that you're facing, and actually if it's something that you can manage, you know, or if you need support or help, etc. So when the stress response fires off in the brain, a hormone called cortisol is released. It's the primary stress hormone, and the surge of adrenaline pumps through our body. It's essentially your body preparing you to manage whatever that stressful situation is that you're going through. The stress response is it's a very small part of the brain, but it's very powerful, because if it's consistently fed, as in, oh my God, this is happening, I feel really overwhelmed with this, and then I can't do this, and I'm struggling with this, but then I just have to keep going, and you're not giving yourself those pauses and breaks to try and evaluate and identify what's going on, come out of that stress response and manage what's going on. If we keep just going from one thing to the next, we keep feeding that stress response, and it's very powerful. It can start to impair certain cognitive functions in the brain. You know, blood can drain from different parts of the brain to that stress response part of the brain to give it strength and power, because it's saying in your brain, you're in danger, you need to keep safe, and it goes into that primary safety mode. So understanding this is really important, and it's helpful for us because close to the amygdala, the part of the brain where the stress response lives, is a part of the brain called the hippocampus. So this part of the brain is responsible for regulating your feelings and emotions, but it's also where your working memory is stored. And at the front of the brain here is an area called the prefrontal cortex. And this is the frontal lobe, more human evolved part of the brain. So this is responsible for your decision making, planning, logical thinking, doing part of the brain. So when you manage your stress levels, you're enabling these three core functions of the brain to work in collaboration together. So it's not just the stress response that's being fed. I hope that makes sense to you all. So finding ways to cope and manage the stress response is important. That's a bit of a brief overview about the stress response. How do you know when it develops and gets too much, and when does it become burnout? So at Karma, we talk about 5 stages of burnout. So you've got, say, you know, the honeymoon phase where, say, you're starting out a new project, say you've left university, you know, you're starting out in your new job, your new business, whatever it is that you're setting up for yourself. And you've got that passion, that drive, that enthusiasm, excitement. You might feel a bit anxious or nervous, but it's anticipatory. And that's, you know, a positive experience overall. Yeah, so you've got that kind of first stage of engagement. Then you have this second stage where you have sort of an onset of stress. Okay, and that is very common, very normal, very natural, especially when you're doing something you care about. Some things come up unexpectedly, some things are difficult to manage, other things aren't. So you're navigating a lot of things, can create some stress levels, but you've got a sort of a general sense of control. Excuse me. When this keeps going though, and there's lots of little bits of stress that start building up, this can lead to a high level of stress for ongoing periods of time that's unresolved. That can lead to more overwhelm, significantly more anxiety, issues of mood fluctuations, more chronic levels. So this is the third stage, okay? So chronic stress, chronic fatigue, feeling, you know, that bit more difficult to cope. It feels overwhelming. You might start to feel a bit more disengaged from other aspects of your life, social engagements, and you're more core focused on, you know, whatever those stress responses are, you know, whatever those stimuluses are. And it's difficult to manage. So you feel like your work-life alignment is out of balance, and it's more difficult to cope. But if this continues at this pace and you're not getting help, not getting support, not hitting that pause button, that's when it can lead to burnout. And we all have our level, our limit, okay? So burnout is that 4th stage. So it's when you feel mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted, like a car running with no fuel. There's just nothing left to give. You feel like empty, you know, it's very difficult to cope. You feel more disengaged, you know, from your work. You might feel more of an out-of-body experience because you're just so disconnected from what's real for you. You know, sort of social engagement, feeling isolated potentially, feeling high levels of stress, feeling, you know, affecting your appetite. Signs and symptoms like, you know, feeling consistently tired, like difficult to sleep, difficult to concentrate, feeling, like I say, disconnected. And then the 5th stage is if that keeps going, which is a very difficult state to be in, it becomes habitual. So it's like habitual burnout. This is where higher levels of chronic stress, chronic fatigue, you know, more disconnection in your life, in your social life and work, very difficult to function. So it's that understanding that we all have our own tolerance levels, our own levels of resilience is really important, because what stresses one person out won't stress another. So being mindful of that is really important. So just think, what does stress mean to you? What comes up? So I'm going to do a little exercise with you. So to just highlight the point of the mind-body connection and when you can start to understand what the triggers are for you, what the signs and symptoms are. So there's a term in neuroscience called the mind-body connection, which highlights that there's evidence to prove that the mind essentially has the power to either heal or hinder the body. So essentially what we think affects how we feel physically and how we behave. Okay, so if we had a little bit more time together, I'd do this as a bit more of an interactive discussion, but please just have a think in your minds and I'll lead you through this exercise, okay? So when we're thinking of that mind-body connection, how things are all interconnected, I'd like you to think of a time where you've experienced stress. Now, just to take care of yourself and manage your well-being today, please try not to reflect on anything too triggering for you or emotionally difficult. Just something that you can recall. It doesn't affect you too much. You know, you can think back on it and be like, oh, that was annoying, but yeah, I dealt with it. But just think about a stressful thing that came up, whether it was something annoying that happened at work or something someone said to you, but that's resolved now. So something that you can feel a bit disconnected from. It doesn't take you back to that time necessarily in a more profound way. Just think about that time, right? And what do you notice in your body? What happened in your body at that time when you were feeling stressed? For example, did you notice your heart rate was increasing? Did you notice that you felt difficulty breathing? Your breathing felt constricted and tense. Your muscles and joints in your body at different parts felt tense and perhaps painful. Did you notice that you were sweating or shaking? Did you have a lot of worrying thoughts going through your mind? Did you feel quite sick and nauseous? Did you feel that knot in your stomach feeling? And that actually stems from research around the brain and the gut and how they both share similar chemicals. So if you've got a lot of worrying thoughts going through your mind, it can really have an impact on your digestive system. Well, whatever it was for you, just think about what those signs and symptoms were, okay? So once you've got an idea of that, shake it off. I mean that genuinely, just like shake your arms, move your body, do something, move around, because state change is really important. We don't want to stay in a state of thinking about stress, okay? So I want you to move, get out of that state, right? Poof, shake it off, not thinking of that stressful event anymore. Now I want you to think about a positive, happy memory and experience that you've had. See what I did there? It's much better that way around. So now think about a really happy experience, something that you can recall and think about that every time you think about it, it's just really positive, happy, you feel content, you feel, you know, like it's a really positive experience. What do you notice in your body then? What do you notice in your mind and your emotional response? Do you breathe more easily? There's so much incredible research around our breath and our breathing, and you know, yes, we breathe every day, but how we breathe is another story. So when you think about stress, I've got to do this, now I've got to do that, I can't believe that happened. Short, sharp bursts of breath that could just exist in your chest. You feel lightheaded, you feel tense, etc. When you're in a positive place, a happy place, this is nice, right? You might notice that your breathing is more fluid, it's more at ease. Think about being on holiday, even on a beach somewhere, and you know, just like, oh, how easygoing it is. How do you feel? Are you tense still in your body? Likely that you won't be. So is the tension eased? Do you feel more lighter, more at ease? Do you feel like your mind isn't wearing as much? Do you feel like you haven't got that tension in your body anymore? What is your sleep a bit easier? You know, there's so many factors in this. So I hope that gives you an idea. Just think about that for yourself and, you know, stay in that state because it's a positive, happy state. Nice one to be in for this talk. So just think about that for yourself and use that as a little exercise, perhaps, just to remind yourself, what are my triggers? Like, what are those signs and symptoms that I notice when I'm feeling stressed? And how do I feel when things feel at peace and content? You know, because we all fluctuate in and out of different states all the time. From our sleepy getting up state in the morning to getting to work, to seeing family and friends, to something stressful happening and having to cope with it, right? So we go in and out of different states, and actually that's quite healthy for our well-being. It's more difficult when we're in one state for a long period of time, whether it's a high state of euphoria or whether it's a low state of depression. That can be really challenging for a long period of time and quite exhausting for our physical, mental states and our emotional well-being. So just think about that, coming in and out of states, right? And hopefully that little exercise gets you to think about what those signs and symptoms could be for you and where you know your baseline is. Like, what does a normal experience feel like for you in terms of feeling centered, feeling calm, feeling at peace? What does that feel like? And really hone in on that. It's about an ongoing journey. So what I'm sharing with you today isn't to try and achieve this state of, right, I'm fully confident, I'm never going to struggle again. It's like, we're human, right? You know, humans have ups and downs. So understanding where those starting at the onset of stress is for you and ensuring that you do what you can to just take a step back before it escalates and builds into something more serious, into burnout potentially, and try and prevent it from escalating. So how can we nurture good mental health and well-being? I hope that's been helpful so far in terms of understanding a little background about the stress response, when it could develop into burnout, and the importance now of bouncing back from that and looking after your well-being. So really, I started mentioning about the breath, and that's what I'm going to touch on today for you all, given the time that we have together. So we breathe all the time, but conscious breathing is something completely different. So not only when you take the moment to actually breathe, you're connecting to your state in a different way, rather than just breathing in and out, in and out. When you take a deep breath in through your nose, allow it to flow through your body, and then release through the nose or mouth. Not only it induces a sense of tranquility and calm and peace in your state, but also it helps to strengthen those important connections in the brain that I mentioned earlier to you, from the amygdala to the hippocampus to the prefrontal cortex. It turns the dial down on that stress response. It's been scientifically proven. So when you're taking deep breaths in through your nose and out through your mouth regularly, even just 30 seconds to a minute, you can feel a profound difference. But it also helps oxygen, get to different parts of the body. It improves your focus, it improves your respiratory system, it expands your lung capacity, but most importantly, it calms down your nervous system. So it's all rooted in science. This isn't just like, oh, just take a breath and you'll feel better. It's actually really, there's a lot of research to back this up. So I'd like to lead you through a short exercise just to highlight this. Because it really can help you center yourself. So if you imagine you're in a situation where you're feeling stressed, you're feeling anxious, taking a moment, giving yourself permission to just take a step back, whatever you're doing, where you can, where possible, and just take some breaths in and out, just to help you reset. And what that does, because it helps strengthen those connections in the brain, it creates a bit of space and a bit of distance from whatever the stressful event is that you're going through, rather than just reacting. Because here's the thing, that's the easy thing to do. It's easy to just react straight away, perhaps say something you might regret. Have any of us been there before? I'm sure we've all been there before at some point in our lives, right? So being mindful of that, the easy thing to do is just react straight away without really giving it a considered thought. So taking a moment to just breathe, reboot, gives you a chance to stop, breathe, and trust your instincts, trust your intuition, but also start to tap into and recognize, okay, how am I feeling in my body? How am I feeling in my mind, my physical state? What triggers am I noticing? How can I calm things down? And just starting with the breath is an incredibly empowering source, and it is your anchor. It's your steel, that place of centeredness. So starting from that place, taking a few breaths in and out, it not only helps with all those benefits I mentioned before, but it enables you to respond to whatever you're going through at that time with a sense of clarity, rather than coming from it from a place of fear or overwhelm. Remember what I said about state change before? So you're shifting your state. You're going from a state of stress and overwhelm to just take a moment, right? So I'm going to take you through a very short exercise. You can use this as a meditation practice. We can just keep your eyes open and focus on the tip of your nose to just avoid distractions around you. You're welcome to close your eyes. Just take a deep breath in through your nose. Allow it to fill your lungs, and then just release through your nose or mouth, whatever feels most comfortable to you. When the breath is ready, as you inhale, take another deep breath in through your nose. Allow it to fill your lungs, stretch and expand to different parts of your body, and then allow it to release. You could use a counting technique here. We count to 3. So with the inhale, you count 1, 2, 3. Hold the breath and then release. 1, 2, 3. Repeat this as many times as you want. And just notice how your body feels. Notice things start to slow down. We're so used to being busy, busy, busy all the time. Just give yourself these few moments to just allow a bit of peace, allow a bit of clarity to come to mind. Just keep that breathing rhythm going in and out. Whatever's going on in the mind, it's not about completely shutting off whatever's going on in the mind, because that's very difficult. We are very busy minds as human beings. So just notice whatever's happening with kindness, with curiosity, taking that step back from whatever's going on. Observe your thoughts as if they're guests in a house. Guests come and go. They're not permanent, just the same as our thoughts. They are not permanent. They don't define who we are as human beings. They are representative of what you're feeling, what you're going through in this given moment. So just simply be aware of your thoughts. Tune into any sounds around you that you can take note of. And just notice how you feel in your body. Are there any areas of tension, any sensations that you notice in your physical body? And if there are, with the next inhale, when it's ready, take a deep breath in through your nose and allow the breath, visualize the breath accessing those parts or that point of tension in your body. And when it gets there, with the exhale, like a puff of cloud, just imagine it dispersing and releasing that tension. Let's take another couple of deep breaths in through the nose, out through the nose or mouth. And just embrace how this feels. Take this moment. You've given yourself permission. So this is proof today that you can do this. We could all afford a couple of minutes each day to just do this, to reboot, reset. And you might even find that it becomes more of a habitual way of taking care of yourself when it comes to managing stressful situations. So by this, you're creating that distance, creating that flow, creating that sense of ease so that you can approach whatever you're going through with a bit more clarity. So if you have your eyes closed, or if they're open, just start to get a sense of coming back into the room. Just give your body a little signal, whether it's wriggling your fingers or toes. And just very gently flick your eyes open to adjust to the lighting in the room. I hope that that was useful for you. Thank you for taking the time to join in this exercise, and I hope that all the different stages and the steps of stress, burnout, understanding the importance of nurturing good mental health and well-being has been helpful to you. You can use that as a way to gain reflection as well as we ease into the end of the year and go into the new year. You can use this as a reflective exercise, just starting with the breath, breathing in, breathing out, and taking notice. So I notice this is how I'm feeling. I notice this is what's happened for me this year. I notice that this is what I've achieved. I notice. That's another technique, another tool that you can use as a reflective exercise, whether you want to write it down or talk to someone about it. Because here's the thing, when we do actually talk about things, write things down, we're also strengthening those connections in the brain that I mentioned earlier, helping your brain to process, regulate your feelings, your emotions. That's why it's so important to share, to connect with people that we trust when we feel it's appropriate. Just get that support and connection, that human connection, but also helps us process and move things forward in a way that's more manageable for us and managing those stress levels. All right, everyone, I believe my time is up, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions that anybody has. I hope that you found that useful. Thank you for your time.
Tania, thank you so much for that. I'm sure I speak to everyone else. That was so interesting, and you covered so much in such a short amount of time. I was furiously writing notes down, absolutely incredible. And thank you for kind of sharing that personal journey as well. My big takeaway, and certainly around that breathing exercise, going into Christmas and New Year, and how stressful Christmas can be, and how this Christmas is going to be even more stressful than previous ones, is really that's my big takeaway and reflection. I wanted to ask one really quick question, and you mentioned around the state change and how we can kind of mix it up. Do you feel that this year, with so many of us working at home and being in our own kind of perpetual home office, be that in another room or our kitchen table or a dining room, do you think that's played a part in us feeling more stressed and anxious, that we've not been able to almost change up our scenery, whereby if we were at work we could go and have a walk and have a chat with a colleague and have those different types of conversations? Do you think that's played more of a role this year than previous?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there are for sure benefits of working from home and flexibility and being able to manage your time in a different way. But for some people also, they do struggle to motivate themselves. And a key driver of, when you're looking at your mental health and in the work context is how motivated you feel, your physical environment in which you work, connecting with others. So we're very lucky in a way. We're fortunate that we are living in the digital age where we can, have this video engagement and we can connect with people globally, which is wonderful. I think it would have been a lot more difficult if we didn't have that as a resource, for many reasons. But yeah, recognizing that it's not going to suit everyone every day, and it can be challenging and have its difficult times. So yeah, I mean, I would say it's so important to put boundaries in place, have boundaries for yourself in your home working experience. Nurture a physical environment that's nice to work in, that's pleasant, that has nice natural light in the room if possible. you know, that have stimulus around you that makes you smile, comfortable, you know, good comfort, obviously, but have points in the day where you do give yourself permission to take little breaks, because breaks is very important for mental health and well-being. Our brain isn't designed to be switched on and whirring for us constantly. It already does a lot for us, you know, and it's taking in a lot of information all the time. So you do need these times to reflect and recharge. Yeah, just thinking of state change. So when can I just give myself a chance to move about, especially if I'm sat behind a desk so much of the time, and when can I get fresh air? And just planning those little points in the day can help us feel a bit of a sense of control, especially in a year where we felt quite out of control in what we can, you know, manage. So there are always going to be things that we can still remain in control of, and a big part of that is our state. Even when things feel stressful, you know, thinking to yourself, well, what can help me? You know, what resets me? And also sometimes who can help me? Because we thrive on connecting with other human beings. So, you know, it's part of our makeup, it's part of what makes us unique. So, you know, nurturing those social connections, whether it's virtual, in person, at least you're still getting that connection, is really important.
Yeah. We've got 2 questions that hopefully you just got a bit of time just to answer very quickly, so I know that you're pushed for your time. One of them is around one of the attendees is really interested about the connection between the gut and mental health, and I wrote that down as well. I was so fascinated with that actual physical connection. They've asked them, how can we manage this? So with that connection between the gut and mental health, do you have any tips that you can help to manage this?
I mean, it's a lot of it's linked to anxiety, right? I mean, like, I'm not a specialist in that area in terms of, I know a little bit about it, I can talk about it, but, you know, I definitely encourage you to research more about it. I think there's a book just called Gut that actually talks a lot about that link between the brain and the gut. But what happens from a mental health perspective, which I can talk on more, is that when we've got a lot of worrying thoughts going through our mind, and it has that impact on our digestive system, it's not trying to, like I say, just block out the mind and think, oh, I just need to have no thoughts, because we're human and we have a lot of thoughts going through our mind. But the breathing technique that I talked about, I can't emphasize enough how powerful breathing techniques really are and what they do from a physiological perspective, as well as with our mental health. But also, we are what we eat. I know that's a really like old saying, but it's so true. You know, be mindful of what you're eating on a regular basis, because mental health is part of our overall well-being, our physical, emotional, social, spiritual well-being. So mental health plays such a big part in that. So when our mental health is affected, it can create an impact on all the other parts as well. So really being mindful of your diet, you know, of course, treat yourself every now and then. We're not saying don't, but just be, you know, think about what nutrition you're getting in your body, drinks wise as well. What sleep are you getting, you know, and what movement do you have in your day, or exercise? And it can be, you know, even just bits here and there, but it all plays a huge part into how you function and feel in your well-being on a day-to-day basis. So the breathing technique, being mindful of your overall well-being, but also, just what you can do to manage the overwhelming thoughts, whether, like I said, it's writing things down, speaking to someone, just so that you feel a bit more in control, can help lessen that intensity between the gut and the brain.
Thank you. And our final question, again, really, really insightful here. So somebody's asked, how do we spot signs of burnout and colleagues and staff that we manage? So that'd be really interesting if you could share some reflections there, please.
That's a really good point. And we do a whole training course on this, so I'll try and distill it down. So the main thing is that it's very difficult to spot signs and symptoms in people that you don't know very well. So getting to know your staff is really of paramount importance, and not just the work check-in and how is this project going, but just little touch points and social things that you can do just to get to know people a bit more, helps make it that bit more easy to identify when there is an issue, when someone does need support. Embedding mental health and well-being as part of your wider strategy in your workplace will help to have those conversations. So it's not just something you have in your one-to-ones, but how are you talking about mental health as a company, you know, and how is that integrated as part of your culture in terms of nurturing mental well-being and how important that is. And in your one-to-ones, you know, one-to-ones are important. I just want to say that I'm not making an assumption that anyone on this call definitely has one-to-ones with their staff, because I've worked with some companies where they just have their annual appraisals and they have informal one-to-ones. And informal one-to-ones are great but having a formal catch up at least once a month, even just with the staff that you have, just create space in that diary and gives them a space if they do want to raise something in confidence to raise it, or if you wanted to check in on how they're doing, if you've noticed something, because it can be quite difficult for someone to have the courage to speak out, you know, when they are struggling with something. So having that one-to-one time aside is really important. But also just think of those signs and symptoms I mentioned earlier in terms of stress responses. If someone seems different from how they usually are, then it's a good sign to just check in with how they're doing and seeing how they are.
And would you say that's a great way just to kind of open that conversation by saying, I've noticed this, I've recognised in you? That is a good tip for any managers on the phone here to start that conversation, and let that person speak and feedback to them.
Yeah, I mean, easing into it like you would have a conversation. How are you in general? But like I say, if you don't usually talk to them in this way, it might seem a bit random all of a sudden. So it needs to be part of the fabric of your culture. I will just say that first and foremost. But you can absolutely make that impact yourself by starting to implement this within your one-to-ones. And, you know, just saying as a manager, I believe mental health is really important. So I just want to check how you are in yourself as a human being, you know, aside from all this work stuff. Open up a conversation about how they are doing. And, you know, if you've noticed something, approaching it from a place of non-judgment, more like, you know, I could be wrong, I could have completely read this wrong, but from what I know about you, I couldn't help but notice that, you know, there seems to be something up lately, or, you know, something seems to be bothering you. Is there anything that you want to talk about? And it's just creating that space, because sometimes that's what someone needs, you know, to have that permission, that space to actually talk about something they're struggling with. When you have managers that do that and role model that, you know, kind of behavior, that's when you start to really see meaningful change, you know, happen within organizations as well, having that openness.
That's great, thank you, Tania. And that piece on values, culture and behaviours is so important and links so well to the conversation around mental health. So thank you so much for today. And I know we've kept you slightly bit longer than
no worries, I'm happy to be here, and I hope I haven't taken too much time as well. I could talk about this for ages though.
Not at all, but thank you very much, Tania, and we're all really pleased that you're able to share your thoughts today. So thanks again.
Oh no, it's an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. And, you know, if I can help anyone further on this call, please feel free to check our website out. This is calmer.com, and it's spelled C-A-L-M-E-R, not K-A-R-M-A, by the way, just to make that clear. But I appreciate that you'll be sharing some stuff in your newsletter tomorrow as well. So.
Yeah, we'll be sharing your details and how people can get in touch and take that forward. So again, thanks ever so much. Great.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care and have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Great, thank you from Tania. I'd just like to bring in the rest of the, oh, there's Susie. Hello, Susie, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us. So I'm just going to bring in Susie now for our second speaker. And again, thank you so much for joining us today, Susie. And we're thrilled that you're able to give your talk, and you're going to be covering support around well-being at Brooks and giving that perspective. And I'm sure that the alumni in the call today are really interested to know what the university is doing to support staff during this really challenging year, and kind of almost like a really nice continuation from what Tania was speaking about there. But again, thank you so much for joining us today. Just for any of our attendees, if you have any questions, same as before, if you want to pop them in the chat function, and when we come to the end of Susie's talk, then we can put some of those questions to her. But I'll hand the floor over to you, Susie. I'll let you introduce who you are and what you do, and then we'll let you go into your talk. But thank you very much for joining us today.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me, and great to hear Tania's talk. And I can thoroughly recommend her the tips and techniques that she's talking about. Definitely do work.
Fantastic.
It's Susie Howden. I'm a staff developer at the Oxford Centre for Staff Learning and Development at Brooks, which is under HR. And I'm definitely not going to tell you when I graduated, but being as old as I am, you can imagine I've worked in a variety of settings, from research to the NHS, to big corporates, and now into higher education. And my working life has been predominantly as a scientist, but when I moved into medical education, it was then that I realised the profound effect that a person's mental well-being can have on their performance at work, and finding out that most medical errors are from human error, and that's as a result of people well-being being impaired when they're conducting their work. And since then, I've explored the area of mental well-being and how this sits not only as a foundation for performance, but generally how it helps us function well as a human being. So I'll share some slides with you just to give you something to look at other than my face. So bear with, I've never done a go-to webinar before. So hopefully everybody can see that now, and I'm hoping that someone will yell if they can't. So this is really a pretty much a whistle-stop tour. It's certainly not everything that we're doing at Brooks, but it's a sort of a glimpse into some of the things that are being done. Like so many institutions, looking after people's well-being is not something new to Brooks, but never before has it become such a focus as when the pandemic hits. And it's been recognised that, as one of our senior managers said, we're not all simply working from home, but we're in the middle of a global disaster trying to work from home. And that reframing of it, I think, helps, gives ourselves a bit of a break. And we've already moved through a lot of change, and what was relevant back in March is not all relevant now. And we've been reviewing things recently at Brooks to see what is still working well and now what isn't, and what new things we need to introduce. And I think as we learn to adapt, some things are getting easier. Certainly, I think a year ago, if people had said this is the way things were going to be from a technology point of view, we'd have said no way. We'd have had a 5-year plan as to how to change the way we use technology. And yet now we're functioning not too bad with it. Still got plenty to learn on that front. But the pace of change, I think, that we've seen over the last 9 or 10 months is what's causing people, I think, to become change weary, and it's exhausting. So just to give a snapshot into how our workforce has been feeling at a recent wellbeing workshop that we ran, we asked what emotions and feelings come to mind first when thinking about work in the new normal. And this is the word cloud that came up. And if you add disconnect with disconnected, you can see how dominant that is. And it's a pretty negative picture out there. And there's one little gem down here, down the bottom, saying creative, which I think is something that may come second to all these negative emotions. And interestingly, but probably not surprisingly, that it's not unique to Brooks, this feeling. I was at a national conference for staff and organisational developers from universities across the UK, and they reported exactly the same trend of their people feeling tired, weary, anxious about the future, disconnected and generally struggling. And also across the UK business sector, the same trend is being reported. And I think although Brooks is a relatively large organisation, these feelings are ones that are felt by organisations and businesses of all sizes. It's just a bigger challenge when you're a large organisation because, as somebody put it sometimes at Brooks, we change at a glacial pace, i.e. extraordinarily slowly. And it's difficult when you're a big organisation. But we have all of these challenges to deal with. And I think the reason why people are weary at the moment is that you have all the challenges and you continue to have all of those to deal with, but you haven't got any of your normal de-stressors or your normal energizers. So you can't travel as freely as you want to. You can't go on holiday like you used to. You can't exercise as you used to. You can't see family and friends as you used to. So it's difficult to address the balance. But I think all too often we're wandering around thinking that everybody else is coping better than we are, when actually much of the feedback we have from all of our webinars and online workshops is about how helpful it is simply when you're brought together in a workshop or a different kind of forum, and you actually realise that you're not on your own, and everyone's feeling the same or similar. Everyone might have individual personal challenges, but everyone's feeling very, very similar. So just I've headed this context, but really it's sort of more about the thinking and the to consider when we're planning well-being, how to help people basically and provide resources and events. There's a huge variety of different circumstances, both at home and at work in Brooks. Some people haven't been on campus since March, myself included. Some people have joined Brooks, i.e. started as a new member of staff and haven't even set foot on campus. And then you've got other people who have never not worked on campus and have seen their working environments change and become unrecognisable. And the circumstances at home, apart from people's space, then you've got lots of other things to cope with, whether it's being isolated and alone, or the complete opposite, and you've got a house full and you've got competing priorities and distractions, whether it's space, children, animals. We've seen lots of animals. My best was a rabbit this week. People have got caring responsibilities and different access to technology. And different things help different people. So not one size fits all. It's not about finding the holy grail to find one thing that everybody's going to leap on and suddenly be fine. We need to find different things to help different people. And our needs are changing and the circumstances are changing. So what was needed back in March is different to what we need now. And I think that will continue to be the case and continue to change. And I think it's still unknown as to exactly what the new normal will be. It probably won't ever be the same again, simply because of what we've all been used to over the past few months. Really, to reiterate what Tania said, the mental and physical well-being are inextricably linked. They are. There's lots of research now into the gut-brain. It's linked, and so I mean it makes sense. Your body is a system, and it's all linked. So it makes sense that these two are linked, and they should be considered and not dealt with as sort of separate entities. And the other thing to think about is well-being is a spectrum. You're not just fine or clinically recognised as being ill. It's a scale, and there might be an event which catapults you one way or the other, either to euphoria and you're very, very happy, or catapults you down into something more clinically recognised, or it can be a gradual slide. And either way, the purpose of the events and the things that we do are all with the intention of helping people stay at the positive end of the spectrum. And the final thing is that we move along this spectrum at different times. It's not a static thing. So just because, say, a member of your team or a colleague is fine now, doesn't mean to say they're going to be fine this time next week or next month. And so those things sort of form a backdrop of what we consider. And Brooks has around 2,000 staff and 17,000 students to look after. So it's a challenge to actually ensure that everyone is reached and included and everyone has access to the things that they need. So I'm sure you've heard this said many, many times before: communication, communication, communication. It's almost impossible to have too much communication at the moment. And the things that we have been doing at Brooks are to have weekly all-staff emails to keep everyone informed. And this clarifies expectations. And in the beginning, back in March, this was so important to have the Vice-Chancellor who runs the university say, guess what, I know everyone's experiencing problems, just do your best and do what you can, was permission for people to be a lot less stressed about what they were having to deal with. So clarifying the expectations was really important and continues to be. It's one of the most fundamental things about employee engagement. People don't know what's expected of them. They don't engage. The other thing is about praise and feedback, and the emails have helped make people valued, so to be thanked for the things that they've done. And most recently we've held the Brooks People's Award, where people are rewarded in a ceremony for anyone who's behaved in an outstanding way and has modelled the university's values. And also it's been really important to do emails and surveys, rather, both general and specific, to consult as much as possible. Again, bringing the university community in to help make some of the decisions, or at least have an input into them, has been extremely valuable. And it gives that sense of community, and also that we're in this together. And also we've done so some specific things, like there's an example here of moving teaching online is one specific thing that we've asked for feedback to check how that's working and see what we need to do more of. But also maintaining the seeking to understand. It's trying to look at every individual and see how everyone is feeling. And then we've had leaders, so our top managers have all formed a Q&A panel, so a live event, so that they're visible and they're accessible, and people have been able to ask them questions on the spot. And also our Vice Chancellor has done video broadcasts, and this has been extremely powerful, seeing him in his home environment with the laundry basket in the background, a cat wandering across the screen now and again, and it just reminds you that the people at the top are human as well, and also struggling with leading us through all of this. And then we've had lots of focus groups to try and coordinate all our efforts. There's lots of pockets, again, with Brooks being such a huge organisation, there's lots of pockets of activity, and we've needed to find ways of staying connected across the university and to share good practice. And so just a few examples of the activities, and these are just happen to be the ones that I've been primarily involved in. We set up a Be Well Buddy system, and this is an informal network of volunteers across the university. Most of them had mental health first aid training, but this wasn't a prerequisite. And this was really to connect any member of staff who was feeling isolated. They just needed to contact their administrator, and they were paired up with a buddy, and they've stayed throughout the 9 months connected. And we get new buddies and volunteers connecting up all of the time. And it's just informal. It's meeting a time whenever there is convenient for them, and the frequency for them. We've had online cafes, which are drop-in and themed, tempting to people to just drop in for an hour, connect across the university. And we've talked about what's worked, time management tips, tech tips, and other bits and pieces. We've run Principles in Practice little webinars, which is a get together for people to re-examine the university's values, because our university strategy has been up for change amongst all the other change, and yet values remain something at the heart of everything we do, our kind of guiding lights. And it's been quite, I think, grounding to re-examine the university values that have stayed stable in amongst all the other change that has been going on. And we've run some personal effectiveness workshops, again, to connect people on specific issues. So we've had that people have flagged as that they've been struggling with in particular. So personal time management, even good time managers have had things turned on their head. People aren't used to having the potential of back-to-back meetings online. They haven't anticipated the intensity and the exhaustion you feel from simply sitting in a chair. And there's all the background distractions, whether it's been other people in the house and just generally a blurring of boundaries. So this has been a really popular oversubscribed workshop that we've run a lot. Communicating assertively has been another one. And this is because people are struggling to have the same conversations online without that face-to-face contact and the body language that comes with that. Another one has been really about building resilience more on an individual basis, about finding balance in these uncertain times and finding that balance between home and work. And finally, about building a resilient team for our managers, because all of the normal management training has taken a bit of a back seat, and it's what are we doing best for our teams right now. And then as an overarching thing, we have an employee assistance program, which is a 24-hour, 365 days a year external phone line and email. It has email access as well, and it provides counselling, legal advice, bereavement support, general advice on medical problems, and a range of other bits and pieces. And we have stacks and stacks of online resources as well. So just to summarise, really communication has been at the heart of everything and continues to be. Leadership is key at the moment, and it needs to be done with compassion. And the communication has really helped to give ourselves that sense of community. So the compassionate leadership is key, and it means noticing and attending to people's hardships and suffering with the desire to do something about it. And although it takes, it's a challenge, it takes energy, the situation remains dynamic. So we need to look at the things that have worked today, which may not work tomorrow, and continue sort of renewing our toolbox, and to have this sort of continuous improvement feedback loop. The situation is dynamic, so we have to remain agile, and like I said, that's a very tall order for a big organisation, but it's important that we do allow ourselves or give ourselves time to be responsive. And last of all, providing resources is great, but validation of feelings is really important. As I said at the beginning, many of the feedback from our workshops has been how great to know that I'm not the only one, that the same things that I'm struggling with is other people are struggling with too. And I think the idea from the past is that we're bound up, we have bound up in our sense of worth is on how much we're producing, which means that on a bad day, when nothing much has moved on, we can feel really bad. But I think true resilience needs to be grounded in the reality that we're all having a really hard time. We need to be kind to ourselves as we find new ways to move forward. And I've pretty much lost count of the guilty confessions of people telling me that they meant to be taking breaks, they should have been exercising, they were going to walk the dog, they were going to do a bit of exercise, but haven't got round to it. And so when an email drops in their inbox saying, oh, guess what, we've got some new wellbeing resources, I think they're inwardly shouting, I know what to do, I know I need to do it. You haven't told me anything new, you've just reminded me that I'm not doing it. So as we now move into another phase at Brooks and restart a lot of our face-to-face development, but moving it online, we're overlaying everything with the current context to make it meaningful for people, and for compassion to be the first priority to yourself and to others. So thank you very much. So now to stop sharing. Oh,
Thank you so much for that, Susie. I'll let you take a moment just to try and stop sharing.
That done it? No.
Don't worry, we'll carry on. It's fine. Thank you so much, Susie. It was another really fascinating talk today, and some really insightful tips there. And one of my big takeaways from there is around those back-to-back meetings, and just feeling that you have no time in the day to be able to take a break. And I'm sure that we can all recognise that, certainly at the height of in the lead up to Christmas, and time is we're so time poor at the moment. We've had a really interesting question on the chat here. Does Brooks share resources and tips from Oxford University or other high education institutions that can kind of help support the work that you're doing? So does that sharing happen at all?
Yes, definitely. There's a lot of sharing, and we meet online in various ways and share good practice, and there's a lot of cooperation that's working really, really well, and the sharing of resources. So I think there's a lot we've generated internally. There's lots of sort of national initiatives that we tap into, like Action for Happiness, Mind, and many others. So yeah, we're sort of open to anything. There's no rules as to where we find resources from.
And just to expand on that point, so for the alumni community, are any of these resources available for us to access, or any of the programs that you mentioned? It'd be interesting just to, I suppose, be clear as to as what we're able to access and what we're not able to access.
That's a good point, actually. I don't know. It's right on the front of the website, so it would be, you could try going to the front of the website and going on, I think it's COVID pages, so it's actually a little bit misleading, and when you go in that, it'll say resources. Whether you can access that or not, I'm not sure, but things like certainly Action for Happiness, Mind have a wealth of resources, and a lot of it is quite repetitious when you start looking at more and more and more. So we've had to do quite a big curating role to make sure that people don't think, great, I need a few resources, and click, and then they're just awash with links and everything else. But they're two good sites to start if you couldn't get any further. I'm not sure what the policy is with alumni. Maybe Molly can.
Yeah, well, that's maybe something that we can discuss with Molly afterwards, because I think if there's some fantastic work that you guys have done to share internally with staff and students, it'd be great if alumni would also be able to access it, but we'll pick that up after the webinar today. Something else that you mentioned, and having been through it myself this year, I was mental health first aid trained, and that initiative that you got with buddying up people who don't necessarily need to have that qualification, but obviously it's helpful if people have. How have you found in terms of people accessing that from Brooks? Has that been, I suppose, one of the great benefits and a real success of a program with the buddying scheme?
So are you just asking how has it worked? And
yes, so has it been one of the most successful I suppose programs that you've introduced this year to support staff, the buddying scheme?
Yeah, one off for sure, and people have the option, so it's dealt with at a local level, which has helped a lot to make it again a little bit more agile. But people have an administrator for their faculty or their directorate, so their group, and you can choose a buddy from your own group, so that helps you to connect with someone in that way. Or if you want someone completely different who you don't know, because you don't want people to know that you're connected, because there's still a lot of stigma around these kind of things, then you get the choice of having a buddy from somewhere else.
Great, fantastic. And I think the final question that we've had is around just some tips to manage when we're all having those back-to-back meetings, and when we're having, how we can boundary and make sure that we are trying to get some time in the day to not focus on work. Do you have any tips that would be really helpful to share with people on the webinar today?
I think blocking out, putting blocks in your diary, because I don't know how other people operate, but my diary is not my own. So if I don't put see a space and stuff a meeting in there, even if I've got one either side, that's one thing. The second thing is I think you do have to have a certain amount of assertiveness. I think sometimes there's the tendency to just accept a meeting, any time, particularly if it's from someone senior. And actually 9 times out of 10, if you say, actually, can we change that because I'm a bit pushed that day, they're fine with it. But we don't often that question. And finally, we've started being a little bit more creative with our timings and setting meetings for 3/4 of an hour or an hour and a quarter. And so that you automatically will get a break, rather than originally when we were just doing hour for hour, because that was the default. Ideally, certainly at Brooks, etiquette is lagging behind the reality. And I think if you have a company and you can have some kind of etiquette shared throughout, then that's really healthy. To say no meetings between 12 and 1 for anyone, or no meetings before 9 o'clock, or no back to back. You can establish some kind of etiquette, but that's lagging behind.
Yeah, absolutely. I think another helpful tip for anyone on the call as well is that contracting piece for meetings, and in organisations I've worked previously, to allow people, if you attend a meeting and you don't need to be there, to say, I actually don't need to be at this meeting today, I'm going to go. And go and do something else. And that's quite hard to build into a culture and values, and you mentioned values before, but again, it's a really helpful tip for people who might be struggling with back-to-back meetings and feeling obliged to go to them, just because, as you say, your calendar isn't your own. But thank you ever so much, Susie. It's been fascinating, and we're really pleased that you're able to join us today. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
No problem at all. I just want to bring in Plassy and Molly and Dylan back on, if that's possible. Hi guys. So I'm very conscious of our time today, but I'm really pleased that we've had such a I suppose a fulfilling talks from both Tania and from Susie today. I just want to bring in Plassy here to see if anything else that you want to add at all before we briefly move on to looking to the future for the chapter. But it'd be great to get some of your reflections, Plassy, just so that the attendees can hear from you as well, not just me today. Oh, you're on mute.
Angel. Ah, there we go. Okay, no, I'm fine. Do you mean on the topic itself?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, no, that's fine. So there is two reasons, as opposed to what Dan has just brought me. One is I'm a huge advocate for support of mental health in the workplace, and the fact that we need to kind of try to eliminate the stigma around it, and that we are very careful about our physical health, but we're not so, and actually shout about our physical health. If you cut yourself, you can see it very obviously, but we are always hiding if we feel that there is a little bit of an issue with our mental health. So there is a lot to talk about it, but I have obviously, like many people, 1 in 4 people suffered from mental health illnesses. So I have experienced that, and I'm a huge ambassador for everyone to speak out, because if you don't speak out, you're not able to seek the help. So it took me 7 years. I wish it'd been a week, and I would have saved myself so much heartache. And the other thing is, with Another Hat, we are putting together our resource for business people in Oxfordshire and around, to be able to have a summary, a list of support for mental health in the workplace, which we will be sharing under Oxfordshire Business First in collaboration with the Oxford Chapter, which will be sharing on LinkedIn, on our LinkedIn group, and going forward. So those two things is, make sure that you talk about it with whomever you feel is a safe place, whether it's a person or a professional, a friend, someone that you feel safe to talk about it. And the other one is watch out LinkedIn group, because we will be putting out there a lot of useful information to continue with this topic.
Great, thank you. And Dylan, could you mind just sharing the last couple of slides before we wrap up the webinar today, because I'm conscious of everybody's time, and I want to make sure that we finish in good time. And someone's just put, apologies, mustache, guilty of not practicing what I preach, with another meeting at 1:30. So I think, really timely topics that we've all been talking about today, so that we can take this forward into 2021. So one of the things that Patty and I wanted to talk about very briefly was just to for the Oxford chapter. So we're a group of volunteers, and our aim is to engage and connect alumni who are based in Oxford. We've all had really positive experiences with Brooks, and we wanted to make sure we give something back, and we all live in Oxfordshire. And just looking ahead to 2021, about the types of content or events that people would like to hear from. We're very much in the planning stage for next year, and we would love to get some input from all of you as to the types of things that you'd like to hear. If you know any fantastic speakers, if you've been to a really interesting talk this year, then to get in touch so that we can help to build a program around that. Ideally, when face-to-face happens, whenever that might be, it could be this time next year, then we want to host some meetings at Brooks, and in a similar format, have an event, but having some time to network and connect with alumni afterwards, and certainly ones which are based in Oxford. So the contact details are on screen now. Hopefully you can see that. If you want to just press present, Dylan, so we can make that big, please. Is Dylan frozen? Dylan's maybe frozen. So if you search, we can send out the details to the LinkedIn group afterwards, but you can also email in oxford-alumni@oxfordbrooks.net, and those are one of the ways in which you can get in touch with us. But we'll be putting some information on the LinkedIn group as well. Patty, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up for today?
No, just one thing to add is the power of actually coming together, engaging and networking is always underrated. I have been networking and engaging for 20 years. I wouldn't have otherwise come. Molly wouldn't have come across myself otherwise to entwine me to get this. But it's a great way of just actually come together. You never know what the ripple effect is from business networking, from business connections, from business engagements. It could be that you find one of your best friends, like I have many friends. It could be that you find your next supplier. It could be that you find your next customer. It could be that you learn something that you take forward, or it's a new skill that you're able to share with people. So do keep in touch, do reach out and get in touch, and we would love to engage with you in 2021 going forward.
Absolutely. Well, I think we'll leave it on that note. Thank you to our speakers for today. Thank you to Molly and Dylan for helping us put this on today. These things don't just happen. So thank you very much for the Brooks team for helping us put this on today. And thank you for everyone that's attended. We're really grateful that you took time out of your day to come to our first meeting. So we hope you have a fantastic Christmas and New Year, and we look forward to touching base even, can't get my words out, in 2021. So thank you ever so much.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.